Hello, hello. It is your girl, T. Michelle, the travel sister, and I'm here today with my homie, the traveling frugalista. And today we are going to talk about something that comes up a lot in both expat circles and also amongst a lot of Africans. And that's this idea of global Black unity. There's this big call that, all the Black people around the globe, whether it be continental Africans or people that are in the wider diaspora in the US, UK, Brazil, and elsewhere, all need to come together and, quote unquote, unify to strengthen the African continent. So we're going to talk about it. Traveling frugalista, I see you over there smiling and grinning. What you got to say about all this?
I'm sorry. That just slipped out. I have so much to say, but the whole notion that we should all be coming together to uplift the continent of Africa is just comical to me. But yeah, I got a lot to say, needless to say.
Well, I have to say that I'm kind of on the fence about it. I don't think that this whole concept of global Black unity is realistic. And I guess the first thing we need to discuss is just this whole idea of Blackness. Is that really a thing? Because for me, I know growing up there was a time that Black Americans have always called themselves Black as a nominator. But there was a time when a lot of quote unquote Black immigrants in the U.S. like they didn't want to be called Black. I mean, we have a whole joke about it, me no Black, to refer to Dominicans particularly, who make it clear that hey, we're not like you all. We are not Black. And that was a common refrain that you heard, from whether it be Jamaicans or even Africans. I'm not Black, I'm African. And so it's been interesting to see this big switch now where everybody is claiming Blackness and coming up with this idea we all need to unite under this banner of Blackness. So I don't know what you think.
Well, I'll be honest with you. Before I moved here, right, here being the African continent, I was a big Pan-Africanist. Like, I was traveling in Africa, traveling in the Caribbean. And I would say, even now, probably the bulk of my circle was non-American born Black. And I was really, and I think a lot of it had to do because when I was growing up, being from California and not having a lot of attachment to Southern roots, because I think a lot of times in the U.S., what's considered Black culture, a lot of it is Southern Black culture. So if your family has been removed from that for an extended period, you're not going to have that attachment. So, I had the whole notion of growing up feeling like I wasn't Black enough. And I remember when I went to college, that's when I started feeling like, okay, Black, but Black looked different. And I would find that I had more in common with people who were from other places, right? But I still knew, and they always reminded me that I was different, that I was not them. I'm cool with them, but I'm not them, if that makes sense. So for me, it is really striking now that we've moved to a point where now all of a sudden, especially as people want to start this whole where we're all Black. Like I look at so much of the stuff debate going on with Kamala Harris, and the Black Americans like, well, no, she's not Black. And they're like, well, she's Jamaican. One, I laugh because I can't tell you how many Jamaicans I know who will argue you down about how Jamaicans are not all Black. That there's Asian, there's Chinese Jamaicans, Indian Jamaicans, white Jamaicans. We're all, what is it? The from many people is one people or something like that is their saying, right? So it is funny to me that you see this metamorphosis of Black being an ethnic identity for Black Americans now being a catch-all. I don't think it's coming from a place of benevolence, to be honest with you. And I don't necessarily think that people who are labeled as Black are the ones who even are encouraging this. I think it is more of a global power structure thing, erasure. And a certain group of people who are labeled as Black have learned that they can monopolize from the concept, and that is why they have start wanting to be labeled as Black. And I'm particularly looking into more like West Africans because they used the ones, and I would say they still are the ones who make this distinction anytime they have the chance. And I give you a few examples just recently because of what is it? Gosh, the different movement right now. You have the Freedmans, you have the ADOS, you have is it FBA, something like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Okay. And people want to act like, oh, these if they're online that they are Russian bots, that they're all insane, et cetera, right? Because they're saying, no, we need to distinguish the unique ethnic group of people who have been in the America, the United States of America, prior to even the founding of the US, right? It's different. The push and pull factors, like this thing sociologists have always talked about, push and pull factors were different. Those people didn't have a pull factor in regards to say, oh, I want to go to the United States for the most part. You had, I do believe there were people who were labeled as Black who were here voluntarily, who were migrating around the world prior to enslavement. But the reality is that what you're seeing today for the last few generations is the difference, right, in terms of ethnic identity. But because now the power structure has told you that you're all the same, there is no difference. Those of you who are from here like us are like, no, but we are different, our needs are different. And those who are new, they're like, if we say we them, we can benefit. We can be the ones who get scholarships at universities. We can be the one who get access to different positions because they're not comfortable with their own Blacks, right, being us. I tell people it's not a coincidence that when you look on your news today, the majority of the people who are Black are foreign born. I don't believe that they're the only ones who are qualified to do these things. And then they want to say we're all Black, but when it's time to celebrate the person for, some accomplishments, better believe then it comes out to say, oh, we're Nigerian, the Giants of Africa. We're the best. Whether it's the lady who won the medal in the Olympics. I mean, it's just so many recent examples of this. And I see it even here in South Africa, the same thing. So I can't say that it's something that's unique to the US. I do think it's unique for a certain group of people when they go places, but it's not just in the US. And for me, I just feel like we have to maybe push back a little on this notion of Black. As you know, I told you the last 2-3 years, I no longer even accept the notion that I'm Black. I think if I got a check boxes and they're gonna say I'm Black, but in terms of ethnic identity, etc., I don't. I do consider myself to be an American, and I consider myself to be wherever I am in the world. And I feel like more of us need to start, claiming that, because I'm gonna always repeat this: who, if not us, who are labeled as Black American, have the right to be American?
You are 100% right there. I mean, I definitely agree that there is this push by the white power structure to, label everyone as Black. And it's just very, very strange. And what's particularly strange is how people have attached to it. I think about for us, like in the US, what people don't realize is that, immigration generally is a fairly new concept for, blacks and quote unquote people of color. When you look at the demographic charts, it's really unbelievable. I mean, in the 60s and the 70s, the number of black immigrants in the US was probably less than 1%. I mean, there just was an insignificantly small amount of black immigrants who were in the US. And so when someone said black American, it was pretty much known who you were talking about because we were, for the most part, the only ones there. You started to see an uptick in the 80s, the 1980s. Um, and even now, I mean, we're in
After the
2024, and
independence
black
movement.
immigrants are only about maybe 10 to 15% of the black population in the US. So, I mean, even to this day, it's still overwhelmingly, black Americans, those who have been in the US for centuries. And whose families have been there for generations. And so I think that, for me, it's just very, very odd because I look at a person who maybe is Ghanaian or who is Nigerian coming to the US and saying, oh, I'm Black American. And people don't realize how disrespectful that is. And basically, it's a form of erasure because we've been there, like you said, for centuries. Our family have been there for 10 plus generations. We actually are some of the oldest Americans. Our families have been in the US
Absolutely.
before there was a US. And most white people in the US can't say that. We're literally some of
Nope.
the oldest Americans in the United States of America. And so, this whole idea that people can come within the last 30 or 40 years and say, I am the same of you, it really is a form of erasure. And I feel like I just think about it like here. If I'm in Ivory Coast, and if I were to say, well, you know what, I'm here now and I am an Akan, like people would take great offense to it just for me trying to take over someone else's ethnic identity just because I've living here. And so for someone else to come to the US and do that to us, like people don't seem to see the parallel when it's very clear to me. Like I just feel like there's a form of respect that, we aren't given as Black Americans. And I think this whole, I don't know if you want to call it a movement, if a paradigm shift, well, whatever you want to call it, this whole idea of now that everybody around the globe is Black, I think that we should all be pushing back on it. We all have our own unique ethnicities, our own unique cultures, histories, and we need to celebrate that. And it's not to say that one is better than the other, but we all have different stories. And we shouldn't let a white power structure reduce us all down to a color, that we all are Black. And all of these other things that make us who we are insignificant. I have a major problem with it.
You know, I agree with you, but I won't say that it's odd because let's be honest. Like I said, one, the whole notion of one Africa to me is a farce. That came from Europeans, right? So even with this, it is different on the continent. This thing is currently happening in Africa, particularly South Africa, with the same group of people. So I can say is that it's not to me because if you have a group of people who have historically always been about themselves, i.e., why people like us have roots from the African continent in the Americas from the jump, right? There has never been a collectiveness. So for them, they don't see it as rude and disrespectful. They see it as this is how I get ahead. And they don't care if it is disrespectful. They don't care if they displace someone else. In fact, the opposite will take place. They actually will usually jump onto the bandwagon of insulting the indigenous Black identified people. I see it here in South Africa, like, the whole label of xenophobia that's constantly pushed. And they're like, oh, they're just anti-African. Like, no, they have issues with particular Africans. And I think a lot of it has to do with this whole notion, the lack of respect for the people who are here and the histories that have impacted their outcomes in their respective countries. And that's the case in the US. But I think it's also even with with music. Like I was telling, we talked about last week with the Buju episode. Again this year, the Notting Hill Carnival in the UK, it came up again because the West Indians are saying, "Hey, this is getting out of control. How you guys want to keep pushing that we're all black, it's all black music, everything should be involved and allowed at Carnival." And they keep trying to say, "No, the history of Carnival is a certain thing, and we have to respect our ethnic differences in regards to, for us, Carnival has been about being." And like some people, like I said with me, they don't even want to hear dance hall. It's supposed to be a soca and calypso type thing, the steel pan and what that signifies. But if you don't even understand the history of Carnival in the Caribbean, you don't understand the history of the Carnival in the UK and how that started, right? You can just come in and say, we're all black. We're all at, and so be it. But the reality is that when it is in the reverse, that is never the case. For me, I feel it's only something that is done by a certain group of people, primarily from West Africa, who have this belief because if they perceive the honey to be better in a certain place, then we should all be welcome and we're all the same. We're all here on the continent, we're all Africans. So South Africans just open the door to everybody, right? In the US, we're all black. So you should just open the door to everybody because we're all black. But it's never in the reverse. And that's how I know it's not sincere. If it were sincere, when these people would come to the US, would come to South Africa, you would never see them throwing it in the face of the indigenous population that, oh, well, you guys just aren't doing as good as us because you're lazy. They start regurgitating the white supremacist ideology of, oh, you're lazy, you want handouts, etc. And then you can even just ask people, look at the comedy episodes, and they'll tell the African comedians, especially those from West Africa, they'll tell you like how what their parents think of those of us labeled as Black Americans, those labeled as Black South Africans, right? So if you really thought we were the same, would your parents be able to joke about us like this with insults? No, it's because they know we're not. And I always feel bad for a lot of the Black Americans who are moving here, who end up getting taken advantage of because they come here, these wide eyes like this, like, I'm going to the motherland, I'm going to my lost people. I'm like, you're not. And they know you're not. I can't tell you how many, even when I was Pan-Africanist, how many times I was called white, like, and for me, it's not an old thing because I know it's coming from a place of being Western. And I claim that, even though I am like truly comfortable, I'm truly comfortable going to the villages, et cetera, et cetera. But I know ethnically I am not the same. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that I remember, I think it was, when did I finish my master's? In 2008. I actually did my master's thesis on health beliefs, right? And I compared health beliefs with different Black ethnic groups, the American-born Black, the West Indian Black, and for continental African Blacks, yes? And literally the sociologists, the data on this is talked about until after 2 generations, you are identified with wherever your parent is from because your socialization is the nuances of that particular culture. But for some reason now, girl, I kid you not, I've actually seen Africans who have visited the U.S. for a couple months. Next thing you know, they're claiming they're Black American when they come to the African continent. It is the bizarrest thing.
Yeah, I've had the same experience. I've actually had like people here that are in some of the expat groups, and they'll say, "Oh, are there any other Black Americans here?" And I'll reach out and say, "Hey, I am." And then when we talk or we meet, I find out that they actually are originally from here. I mean, I've even had people who are originally here from Ivory Coast, born and raised. But they went to the U.S., they lived there for a few years, and now they're Black. Now they're Black American. Literally, I'm very serious. So there's one lady in particular, like she's cool, like we get along, but she literally was born and raised here in Ivory Coast. She went to the US, she lived there, for maybe about 10 years, and she's come back. But now she calls herself Black American. She's a US citizen now, so now she's called herself Black American. And I think that this is totally normal. It's the most bizarre thing in the world. Yeah, like she never identified herself as Ivorian or that she was born here. I literally had to ask because I heard the accent. So I mean, I knew that she wasn't a
Girl,
native born Black American.
girl, I'm gonna need you to stop. And I tell people, and this is how to me you just know this is outlandish. Like, I'm married to Cameroon, right? And even if we move there, I'm never gonna see myself as Cameroonian. I would see myself as American because that is my cultural identity. So for me, the whole thing is comical. How did you laugh in her face? Because I don't think I would have laughed in her face. I'm like, why are you acting like you didn't grow up on a check-in? Why are you acting like you grew up on gumbo and not a check-in? And to me, I think that's part of the whole thing with Kamala Harris. I find comical when I see people being insulted and people are like, but she's not Black. And they're like, oh, so now you guys are dunce. You don't realize that, she's Jamaican. And I'm like, but that doesn't mean she's Black. And then I think, was it yesterday? Somebody sent me a comment. I guess she was talking about these greens again. And so for me, the first thing I thought to myself was, okay, even if you said that she's a Jamaican, wouldn't the discussion be on what type of callaloo she makes? Because that is the cultural norm for Jamaica. How good her rice and peas are. Where the hell does the collard greens come in? That is a distinctly American thing. And that to me, I think is part of the pushback. I feel like there needs to be more in regards to this, because the reality is that we do have a distinct ethnic and cultural identity as Americans who are labeled as Black. But I'll be honest with you, I don't fully fault those in the quote unquote diaspora for this new thing, a phenomenon that's happening. I actually fault elite Black Americans, because I think they're the ones with the global power structure who is encouraging this, because it's not even sensical to be having some of these discussions, and you're like, why do you think this is normal? Like, when you around, it's like it's okay to respect people's ethnic differences. It doesn't mean we have to just all be flat. Like, okay, we're Black, but what is Black? And they like to try to push this whole thing like, oh, there's a united Europe. No, there's not. There has always been a distinct Europe. You have a group of Europeans who are the same, because guess what? They've historically been the same, right? Whether it was the British, the French, and Spanish, they have always had ties. But have they always respected the ones in Eastern Europe? Do they see themselves as the same in those in Eastern Europe? Do they see themselves as the same as those in Southern Europe? Absolutely not. And even the ones who are tied family-wise, like I said, like when you look at the French history in terms of their dynasties, the British dynasties, they've always intermarried in things, right? But they still fought a 100-year freaking war for their language and their culture. But now you, in 2020, Black, you want to buy this whole notion that, oh yeah, everybody who has Black skin is Black, except for when it's convenient. When it's convenient for you not all to be Black, then you're not. And I use the example of Polynesia. Europeans will tell you that the people in Australia, right? The Aboriginal people of Australia, the people of Papua New Guinea, the people of New Caledonia, etc., that they're not Black. They're not even African. They will tell you that they're not even African. But they want us, who've been in America for who knows how long, with whatever kind of admixture, because we all have something else going on in our gene pool in the Americas. But we African, like, where's the logic in that? And typically, if you ever read and research the different cultures in Polynesia, you actually see they have so much in common with the African continent, far more than us. I remember when I first started like New Caledonia, and start seeing that they have yam festivals. I was like, oh my goodness, like full on festivals. And we're not talking about sweet potatoes like we have in the US. We're talking about the yam tubers that you see in Africa, the same. Whether it's the feathers, whether you because we have the African art business. When you start seeing the like the mask, etc., all these things that you see in that part of the world, it is almost identical to the African continent. But Europeans will tell you that them people are not African, and they definitely aren't black. It's not logical, and I just feel like sometimes, as people who are labeled as black in the Americas, they have been told that they have no identity by black elites for so long, right? Who historically, people like to talk about this, they were funded by white liberals to push a certain belief that you have no identity. You are lost Africans. So now I think black Americans have accepted this notion, and people on the continent, those who like to exploit for themselves, right? They're like, oh, we can benefit from this. So even when you come here, especially not so much in Southern Africa, you're not going to get this as much, right? But definitely, as they'll be pumping you up, making you think that you a sister, they're in a cousin, welcome home, long lost, because they want to try to take advantage of you. But they know that you're not. They know we are not all the same. And I think the ones that really grind my gears, I've been seeing recently this whole notion that, Black Americans need to come back to Africa and help build Africa as one. If y'all risking y'all life, your baby's life, and everybody else going at sea to go to the Americas, and you don't do a damn thing to build your own country, let alone continent, why would I, as a Black American, think that I should be coming over here to do something? Like, to me, where's the logic in that? But Black Americans are falling for it. And that's when I'd be like, okay, have too many of us been dropped on the head as babies? Because this makes no sense. The people from a place do absolutely nothing to build the infrastructure. They only worry about, building their own wealth, doing their own thing. But they want to tell you to come home and build. Make this make sense, girl. I'm sorry, all in the name of blackness.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. And this whole concept of global black unity, I mean, I've really come to the realization that it's nothing but a time waster. I think that, as long as people keep talking about we need to unify and making that the focus and the priority, then no real work gets done. Like you said, nothing actually gets built. I mean, when you look at, Europe, which people like to compare, like, we need to be unified, quote unquote, unified like Europe, or even here in the United States, because I've heard a lot of Africans make this call that, we need to have a United States of Africa. We all need to be one. We all need to be unified. And I mean, number one, I don't think it's realistic. When you study the history here on the continent, it's never been the case. People here have always had their separate kingdoms, and they were never unified. I mean, just look at all the wars that happened. And frankly, let's be realistic. That's how we got over to the US in the first place, because people weren't, quote unquote, unified. They were fighting, selling people off. And so this whole idea that now all of a sudden everybody is going to unify is just extremely unrealistic to me. And to go beyond that, when you look at Europe, like you said, number one, I mean, even to this day, there still are, very real distinctions between, the Eastern Europeans and what, people look at as quote unquote Europe. They don't consider those people really them.
Nope.
There's a huge, financial disparity and all of that between those different countries. And so this whole idea of unity is extreme. It's extremely bizarre to me. I think the things that we need to be focused on in terms of unity is, number one, like you said, building up infrastructure. Do people need to unify on that? Absolutely. We need to build more trade agreements and more trade in general between countries on the continent. Do they need to unify on that? Absolutely. There should be more trade between the African continent and places in the Caribbean or elsewhere where the quote unquote diaspora is. And I think that there have been some inroads towards that, but those are the type of things that we need to unify on. But this whole idea that every Black person around the globe is going to come together and quote unquote unify, like, I still don't even know what that means. I haven't had anybody who's been able to give me like a good example of what does that even mean, that we all need to unify. And I think it means different things to different people, but for me, everything's come down to economics. The social is secondary for me. So,
Well, see, that's the thing. I would say that it is very clear as to what it means. It's being done to be able to exploit those of us in the diaspora. Let's make no mistake about that. It is not about a real trend, because again, these people know you are not them. I don't care what people want to try to tell you. I don't care how many Black Americans they hire to work on year to return campaigns. I don't care how many Americans they hire to do whatever. They are pushing something that just absolutely is not true. They're very clear. Black Americans should come over here and help us build the continent. And my thing is, why? Why do you need me to come and tell you to pick up your trash? How about that? How about you start, just like I tell my husband, why can't your village and in your part of segment of your village, all I say, we gonna start cleaning up the rubbish in our little area every Sunday. You don't need the government to do that, to tell you to do that. That's on you. But guess what? They don't. Right? So why do you need me as an American to tell you to do that? To me, until you start, it's kind of like as a parent, you tell until I see a change in your behavior, I can't do additional things for you. And to me, until they get at home, there's nothing that externally, because we do not understand the cultural nuances. And to me, it's just setting Americans up for exploitation. I also think that a lot of the times we have to start letting go of this notion of we are lost. We are not. And I think that's a big part. It's funny, I was talking to my mother just yesterday because she saw something, it has something to do with the election, and she was offended. And she's like, my grandmother, she said, they always want to hyphenate us, but your grandmother told me that I'm American. She said, they have changed our name how many times from, Negro, colored, Afro, et cetera, et cetera. It meant something as in terms of an identity. But the underlying thing was that we've been here. And American, whatever you want to call us, the one thing is true and constant is we are American. And I think more of us need to own that. And I think because we've been fed this line of BS for so long about being lost, we just looking like lost little desperate puppies. And I believe that those who like to exploit and benefit from people who are, they see that as a way of making money. And to me, that's really what it boils down to. I think I tell people, I encourage people to come to the continent. I still do. I encourage people to travel the continent, live on the continent, but come here with the mindset that you would have going anywhere else in the world. Like I know we guys had this discussion. I tell you that I granted that I have a very, some distinct features, right? But people can't always what I am. And then I think the way I carry, so they're just like, we're not quite sure like what's going on. But I've noticed that in the last years now, when I'm traveling, like I start getting questions like, but where am I from? America. They're like, in your America. In the weirdest places is I like when I'm of Africa. And I guess I think it's because, I have these cute almond eyes, which, I do love them. I give thanks to whichever ancestor, passed these down to me in like O's or whatever. But they're like, and I never forget the conversation with the immigration in Morocco. He was like, and your grandmother said, California. He's like, California. I said, He's like, I said, before that, American, I said, have seen this influx of people who will tell you that, that they're American, but then they have other passports. I was like, no, I have one and only one. and it's not going to change. I entered on this one and I'm going to exit on this one. And the guy laughed and he was like, but you live in South Africa. I said, yeah. He's like, why are you there? You should come here. He's like, you look like us. I was like, no. I said, but actually, I do kind of like Casablanca, so maybe one day. And then we laugh. But the reality is, it's because there's become this weird mix up of ethnicity, race, culture, etc. And I am very much out in American today. I'm not going to be the ones who sitting there red, white, and blue flag, all that. No, I'm not going to do that because I feel like other groups can tell you how much they love their country, right? But they can insult their country, insult their government because they don't agree with the policies or whatever. But as an American, we're told that we can't be proud of an American because of America's, behavior around the world. Guess what? You can badmouth your government. You can think that things need to improve in your country and still be like, I'm an American in the day. Now, will I around doing that in certain parts of the world? No. But I feel like at this point in time, people who are black from other countries, whether it's in the Caribbean or Africa, is the same way. And you brought up an interesting thing about the Caribbean, that there should be more trade with the Caribbean and Africa, whatnot. But they too have learned that these people from a certain part of the African continent, I would never say all, because again, to me, there are very distinct differences in regards to the African continent in terms of behavior. That's why people from a certain part of the continent don't have the visa restrictions as those in other parts, right? Look what happened with the Air Peace debacle in the Caribbean. When the Caribbean, because they really, really be wanting to build their relationship with Africa. They be like, oh, we please let us be part of the diaspora and the AU and all that. They start letting planes come in, thinking that they want to be like us, they want to build with us, they want to tour us. And what was they really doing? Coming over there doing all kind of illegal stuff and trying to use that as a launch pad to get to where? To the United States of America. So girl, you can't get me to believe. I don't care if it's 10 people coming from the African continent, particularly from West, Central, and East Africa. Nine. You hear me? 9. They not doing it because they say, oh, we care about everybody and we all the same. No, they're coming to exploit or to benefit somehow from being in close proximity to whiteness that's in the Americas. And I would say in other parts of the diaspora where they believe the honey is sweeter.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this whole, I always laugh because, I say that the difference between a Black American who is going to have success on the continent or who is going to be exploited on the continent is whether or not they think they're lost and whether or not they embrace their Americanness. And, you cannot run that game on me, baby, because I'm not lost. I have traced my family back in the United States of America back to the 1700s. It goes even farther than that. But so no, I'm not lost. We're firmly ruling in the United States of America. I'm proud of what my people did. They survived through just unthinkable acts and built up the richest country in the world and the one where everybody is trying to come to. So people can't run that you lost game on me. I'm not going for it. And I can start running down a list of our culture and accomplishments. So I don't need anybody else's. Do I enjoy it? Absolutely. I love learning about different cultures here on the continent and, celebrating and enjoying it with them. But at the end of the day, it's not mine. I have my own. And, what would have been in the past is in the past. And so I have to live with, what I've been faced with today. So it's just as simple as that. And I think that, it's interesting because, people here on the continent, as we know, particularly here, like where I'm at in West Africa, have very different, distinct ethnic identities, which they absolutely embrace, and celebrate. And talk about their differences. Like tribe rules everything, particularly here in West Africa. I mean, I think that's probably true continent wide, but I think it's particularly so here in West Africa. So once again, like this whole idea of quote unquote, we all need to unify. there should be one Africa, no borders, people should be able to go wherever they want to. And I think, for me, as what I consider myself an outsider looking in, I don't know how possible that is under the current structure, because like you said, there seems to be this exploitation element that's there, and people basically don't want to build up their own countries, but they want to go to other places where the grass appears to be greener and basically be able to benefit from the same thing that the citizens who created that can benefit from. And I don't know, that's it's problematic for me. I think that everybody in their own corner of the world needs to be working on how can we build up our own countries. How can we create an economic system, an economy that isn't so dependent upon white foreigners, Chinese foreigners, Arab foreigners, Indian foreigners? How can we build commerce amongst ourselves and make a world where we have more prosperity? Because, at the end of the day, uh, while people are calling for quote unquote unity, nobody is working for these things. And so you have all of these foreigners that are coming and they're exploiting, this, what I consider to be a lack of unity. Because if you were really unified, you would understand that money and the economy is everything.
Well, that's the thing. So essentially you are kind of believing this whole notion that everybody is one, because you're saying that you should working together to build. See, for me, I'm not saying that. I don't think that I should be trying to build the African continent. I think people in each are focusing on their respective area, country, region. That's why I will continue to sing praises for what is happening in the Sahel today with the Confederation of Sahel States. They realize that, wait a minute, we are the poorest nations on the continent, but we are three of the most wealthy. We've had these people here, whether it's the UN, France, the US, are telling us that they are helping to keep stability and deal with terrorism. Yeah, we've had more terrorism attacks with them on our soil. So it's time for us to start defending ourselves. The people have got to, if we want a fighting chance, we have to do this ourselves. And they started coming together saying, no, we're going to defend each other. And they based it on old historical, ethnic, and cultural ties, not on these so-called African boundaries that, France created when they were colonies. And I think that is what is needed. And that's where you should start. Not trying to get everybody all over the continent to come together, because that's not going to happen. To me, even starting in your own, just your small region, and say, hey, we need to clean up this rubbish. You don't need China to tell you you don't want to live with rats. You don't need China to tell you it's not good to just cook and just throw stuff onto the ground. You don't need someone to tell you that. That has to come from within you. And until people want to do that within their small area, they can't even network with anybody. And to me, I think that should be the focus. And anything outside of that, to me, is really just a way for other people to try to go places and benefit from themselves. That's why you can constantly see this whole push now with, oh, this is Africa. They only want to show you the negative. No, the reality is that the majority of the people are living like this negative. So I'm not going to just be silent and be like, oh, yeah, we do have all these great people. Yeah, you do. But at what cost? And when we look, and we know for a fact that most of the people who have extreme wealth on the African continent have gotten it through illegal tenders, it's through graft through the government stealing from the people. I'm sorry. I'm not going to celebrate that. No. If you want me to be impressed and think that I might ever want to say, okay, I should come in as someone who's part of you, ask for the help, start doing for self. And you also touched on this whole thing with how long your family's been in the Americas, right? And that's why I tell people, many American families have been here prior to the inception of what's current day United States, right? Which is actually longer than many of these even African ethnic groups. Their kingdoms and things do not go back, that far in some instances. There were large kingdoms, right, that can go back even before Europeans can even discuss, and before they started coming to the America or to the African continent. But let us make no mistake, not especially in West, in Central Africa, a lot of these ethnic groups are not old. So if you have an identity and you're fairly new, or you look at the ones in Liberia, right? If you're allowed to have an ethnic and not be lost, then so can we. I think we need to, that's where things need to start. Respecting people's ethnic differences and cultures and start focusing on self. Start focusing, not self in terms of what we already see in Africa, not everybody feeling himself and being selfish, but in terms regards to your region, even your village, your whatever kingdom, whatever, and then go from there. Just imagine if you have if every small region started, we're gonna start doing this. We're gonna come up with a system to dig boreholes. We're gonna come up with a system to get solar panels. We're gonna come up with a system for this. Could you imagine how great the continent would be? You don't need an outsider to do that. There is enough. Well, like I tell my husband where he's from, I said, every family probably in your got somebody who they like to brag about who live foreign or who making money. They send money home to buy or send a car home that they can drive in the village with potholes and stuff, right? Why can't all of these people come together and pave the road? Why can't all these people come together and bring a trash truck? Teach people how to compost. I mean, there's things that the people can do, but they don't. They leave their respective countries, they leave their respective religions, and their claim to fame is being able to go on social media and be like, I'm foreign and doing well. Miss me with that. I can't help that because me no black.
Girl, you're hilarious. It's funny that you mentioned about the roads because, this time of the year is rainy season in West Africa. So, here at, in Cote d'Ivoire, we're like coming towards the end of rainy season. But basically, rainy season tears up the roads here. They're like potholes galore. And, so it's kind of like dodge them. At least until probably like about September or October or something. And the government will come by and fill in some of the potholes after the heavy rain stop. But in the interim, like you're having this, these big potholes everywhere, and I just always have to snicker because I mean, like right here, the building where I live at. There is like a huge pothole that's like right outside, right in front of the building. Now, there's also this big pile of construction, like, dirt or cement that's out there too. And so I always wonder, like, there's so many of these young guys around here. Like, why is nobody thinking about, what, let's fill in this pothole with some of this construction, material, at least as a temporary, stopgap until, the rain stop. It's just weird. And I mean, it's so true what you say. It's just the same as with the garbage. Like folks just throw garbage, on the street, it's just there. They will eventually burn some of it off. But like you said, it's just the whole idea of waiting for others to do what
Yep.
you could do for yourself. And unfortunately, that seems to be very common here on the continent from what I see. People like wait. And what happens is that it usually is some foreigner that comes and takes care of some of these problems. And then they're exploiting and they're making a lot of money off of it rather than the people all coming together and solving this problem and creating, something that's beneficial for themselves. So I don't know. If there's unity for me, that's where the unity needs to be. I think that we were saying the same thing. I definitely agree that people should be, doing what they need to do in their own small region of the world, in their country. But I also do believe that, as, Black people, that we should be setting up some kind of trade system and economic system that benefits each other, where we can trade and do business with each other, because that's certainly what, the whites and Europeans have done. So, but at the end of the day, this whole idea of, this social unity where everybody, looks at themselves as one big Black group. I don't know about that one.
Well, that's it for today. Are you Team Michelle that we are all Black but with a distinct
No,
ethnic
no, no,
group, and
no,
we should
no.
be.
I didn't say we was all black. I never said that.
But with a distinct ethnic group, yeah, you said that we
If
have
we
distinct
distinct ethnic
ethnic.
groups, that's not we all black.
But you said we should come together as black people and build. So
No,
you
that's
got to
not
be
what I
black.
said. I said that we should have
Oh,
economic and trade systems amongst each other. That doesn't mean that we should all
exactly.
be building up the continent. You've never heard me say it out of my mouth that Black Americans should come to the continent and build. So I want to make that
Okay.
clear.
So who's the each other? Who is the we should be built like economic relations? Who is the
There
we?
are over 1 billion people here on the continent of Africa, so that's who I'm primarily speaking of. I I mean,
With
how is it that the 45 million of us in the U.S. should be coming somewhere where there's over 1 billion people? Like that just makes no sense at all. So no, you've never heard me say that. So I want to be clear. Can we assist if we're asked? Absolutely, but
but why? Why would we be assisting? Because you feel we are what?
Well, at the end of the day, we are of African descent. I mean, there's no denying that.
Okay. So that's what I'm saying. Are you team Michelle in that sense? Or are you like me? And I feel like, yes, at some point in my I was African descent. I've got some African ancestry. There's no doubt about that, right? But I like at this point in time, like I keep saying, if you got folks who've only been visiting the U.S. for a couple of years and they think they are American identified first, who am I who've been here all these years to not think that I am American, right? And with that, who am I to think that I should be trying to nation build, assist with anything on the African continent based solely on the fact that I had some African ancestry at some point in my DNA? I don't. So let us know in the comments. What do you think? Am I crazy? It's possible. Or maybe I'm crazy and right. I don't know. But let us know. And remember to like, share, or subscribe and give us feedback. And then talk amongst yourself as well. We'll see you on the next African Tea, where we're going to dive into what it's like living in our respective cities. I'm in Johannesburg, South Africa. Michelle is in Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire. So we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The African Tea. Bye.